Good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us at our beautiful new studios here in Franklin Park West in St. Albans Town. And happy to have on the panel for this special show, St. Albans Police Chief and Fire Chief Gary Taylor. Good to see you, Chief.
Thanks.
Paul Moritz, a corporal with the City Police Department and also the SROs School Resource Officer at BFA. Paul, good to see you.
Thank you
and
for
Roger
having me.
Langevin, SRO School Resource Officer just down the road at SATEC, St. Albans Town Educational Center, also a corporal with the St. Albans Police Department. Good to see you, folks. Well, with having the luxury of two SROs on the show, boy, school safety just seems like the obvious topic to jump into. Again, in the wake of yet another recent shooting in Santa Fe High School and in Texas, just a tough situation. Paul, let's start with BFA. I mean, is this, are you running into more students? Is it obvious that the concern of students goes up as the number of shootings increases, or does that change your job at all? Or just kind of give us the sense at BFA in light of all the stuff going on?
I don't think it's a change in the number of students that we're worried about.
Yeah.
We get more, or I've been getting more students who are afraid to come to school because of everything going on.
Wow.
So they're constantly stopping in and saying, hey, you know, I'm afraid, are we safe here?
Yeah.
I'm getting it from students, staff, faculty, everybody.
Yeah. Are there some students who are literally not coming to school because of this? Are there a few students even not daring to show up?
Not so much anymore. When we had the Parkland shooting, and then briefly after that, we had a threat at BFA, where we had to evacuate the school.
Yeah.
And for a few days after that, there were students and parents saying, you know, my children aren't coming to school until we know they're safe there.
Wow. And Roger, down the road at SATEC, of course, younger kids. Is it a different kind of atmosphere there in the wake of the number of shootings, or, you know?
I think, Richard, it causes us all to become a little bit more vigilant and really look at our security measures.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're in good shape in the sense that we do the lockdown drills, we do the, you know, the fire drills. You know, we've had the Survive Vermont training in our community. So I think for the most part, we feel pretty secure, but it does raise the anxiety level amongst parents who are dropping off those little kids. I'm in a K through 8. So especially the little ones, you know, they kind of get a little more attention during that time just to make them feel comfortable and safe at school. Yeah.
Chief, your thoughts. Again, you've got BFA, you've got SATEC, you've got the St. Albans City School, three schools.
Yeah.
Do you feel pretty good about if a situation, God forbid, did happen? I mean, you feel pretty good about your training and situation you could deal with?
I do, but I would tell you this, Richard, that if there's anything that keeps me awake at night, it's active shooter incidents, and they happen way too often.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves confronted with it. We have developed some excellent plans, I think. And of course, we all know that sometimes it's the best laid plans of men and mice, right? But anyways, one of the things that we did a few years ago, I'm kind of passionate about the active shooter and the school thing, is we did a little, I walked in one day and said to the two commanders at the time, make a list, take a piece of yellow paper and make a list of everything you do if we had an active shooter incident right now at BFA. Yeah. And I went back to my office and started listing some things. And 10 minutes later, I walked back in and said, okay, you got to put down your pencils, because the average school shooting lasts 3 to 7 minutes.
Is that right? 3 to 7 minutes.
And I'd given them 10. And we hadn't figured out yet who was going to take responsibility for everything. So in recognizing that, we front-loaded everything that we could. So there's a plan for every school, every major business, employer in the city, and we did some very basic things, like we have an agreement for an emergency for some automatic response from the Border Patrol. They have a helicopter sitting less than 20 minutes away from us, and they take responsibility for clearing the airspace over the site. Wow. We have people who are assigned to take command of the dispatch 911 call center, and they'll contact the railroad. You know, because we'd be a community cut in half if the railroad wasn't warned and told to stand down while the crisis was occurring. We've even pre-planned the message that would go out to the other police departments. For mutual aid, we've picked locations to stage those people. One of the things that they discovered after the Essex shooting is if you call for help, you better be prepared to manage that. Or else it kind of becomes helter-skelter. The police have a tendency to drive right to where the crisis is and bail out of their car.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. So we've done all of those things ahead of time.
Yeah.
We've shared those plans with other emergency service providers, and they've copied them to some extent, which I'm fine with. And we spent a lot of time looking at the models that are available for response.
Yeah.
And we've chosen one that's fashioned after the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Agency or Association. In the 50s, they developed a plan to try to stop incidents of injured children whose clothes catch on fire or if there's a fire in the school. And they started their program called Stop, Drop, and Roll. And to this day, most people, if you ask them if their clothes caught on fire, what would you do, can recite that. It's pretty easy to remember.
Makes me think of Joe Beaudry, I think.
Yeah, Fireman Joe.
Fireman Joe.
But anyways, in Houston, Texas, a handful of years ago, they came up with what they believed was a good model. And that model's fashioned after the Stop, Drop, and Roll. And it's called Run, Hide, Fight. And it's a continuum rather than a ladder. So depending on where you're introduced into the incident, you may have to choose the only option available to you at the time in order to get to a point where you can maybe use a different model. An example of that might be if you encounter the shooter almost immediately, obviously hiding's not going to be one of the options.
Yeah.
But you may fight. And fight doesn't mean that you have to learn a martial art. It simply means fight to survive. Don't give up. So if it's pushing the person away from you, which gives you that 2-second break you need to run, then you run. If it's using a fire extinguisher and opening it up at the person, or even using it as a weapon, but that buys you time, that's a great thing because now people have a chance to escape. And that becomes the run. So they start off fighting, they quickly go to hiding, or running, depending on what's available to them. And we think that it's universally applicable. So it wouldn't make any difference if you're at a movie theater or if you're at the mall or in a school. And Run, Hide, Fight is fairly easy to explain. It doesn't matter if you're 8 years old or 78 years old. It's pretty easy to explain. So people get it. They understand. What I would say to people is if you were in a supermarket and some young person who worked there came up to you and said, get in that closet and don't come out until the police show up. Are you going to do that? Because I think there would be hesitancy on everybody's part. So we should be informing and educating the public. We should be telling people, you have some options. That's how you empower people. Let them participate in making some of the decisions themselves.
So this issue obviously gets a lot of your attention, so it sounds like you feel reasonably comfortable as you can ever feel, I guess. But
yeah,
it's an issue that gets
a
ton of attention, obviously. Huh?
Yeah, I think you do. So we started this program called Survive Vermont with Walt Crow from AmCare and with the Department of Health and with Northwest Medical Center.
Yeah.
And it was dubbed Survive Vermont. It's 3-part. They're national models. The first model is see something, say something. The second part of that is Run, Hide, Fight. And the third part is Stop the Bleed. Because in most of these events, the fatal injury is caused by gunfire or violence, and it usually involves bleeding. And if it's arterial bleeding, you have 3 to 5 minutes to survive, despite what anybody does.
Really?
So what we saw in Las Vegas is people improvised. They took their neckties off and made tourniquets. They used their belts. They tore sleeves off their shirts. And what they found is that makes the biggest difference on casualty numbers. So that's the three model parts that we use. And how do you guys feel about that?
Well, we've presented this. Well, we had the first presentation at City Hall where we had a bunch of community members show up, and since then I've had Captain Hogue come to BFA and he's presented it to the staff members at BFA, and then on a separate occasion the staff members for Northwest Technical Center. And since that time, I mean, it's been great. It opened up a dialogue, and it made people start thinking. And I've actually had teachers call me into their classrooms and say, okay, so if something were to happen today and I know the shooter is here, what should I do? And it's like, okay, it just opened up that dialogue. So we went through, okay, here's an exit that you could use. Here's something you could use as a weapon if they were to come in here. So it was a great learning experience, and it got people thinking about what would they do during a real incident.
Roger, have you done that? Has there been involvement at SATEC about that also, or not?
Yeah, I think a lot of the older kids in our school, say the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, there was a lot of talk at home. You could tell it was generated from there, and they came into the school with questions. They wanted to know a little more about these lockdowns and what can they do and that type of thing. So I actually went into a couple of classrooms and we spoke about run, hide, fight. Principal Stebbins, Angela Stebbins, is right on board with that. She was there with me, and we discussed it with those grades. But it's important also to listen to your teacher. So if you're going to run, you're running as a group away from the incident.
You get the sense that students and teachers maybe feel hopefully not quite as maybe helpless or maybe slightly empowered by this when they hear stuff like this.
Right, and although we don't necessarily want them to think that's the only answer. I mean, sometimes hunkering down is the answer, and sometimes it isn't. And now they have a choice, as the chief was saying.
One thing I would add is that there's still a need for an institution to do a lockdown. Because the institution can't make independent decisions. So I think it's smart to lock down the school or whatever the location is. Maybe you prevent access. Maybe you stop the person from having ready access. What we know is from cases that have happened with active shooters is the event traditionally has ended when active shooter team or the SRO or whoever it is encounters the bad guy, the shooter. And oftentimes it's suicide or there's a shootout between the police officer and the bad guy, and in many cases people have surrendered. So we know that if we can buy some time to get the emergency responders there, we think that will help to reduce the casualty numbers too.
Paul, I'm curious, just what's a typical day? Maybe there's not a typical day, but just in your job as SRO at BFA, can you just quickly take us through what you're doing? Is there such a thing as a typical day or nothing like that?
Well, first of all, you're talking about law enforcement, and there is no such thing as a typical routine day in law enforcement. And when you're an SRO of a high school where you're dealing with teenagers, there's no such thing as a typical day in a teenager's life. So there's no routine, no typical day. I like to be out into the halls, talking with the students and stuff. I think I've been there since January in the school.
And obviously a very visible figure. I mean, kids know you're there. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
I mean, you're there every school day, or if someone's covering for you if you're not available.
Yep. And for the most part, it's I've been able to converse with the students. There's a really good rapport going on with most of the students. They've come to me and asked me to help them out with different projects. I had a student come to me and say, hey, I'm trying to do this prom proposal for my date to the prom. Can you help me out with this? And told me what he wanted me to do. And I'm like,
get any homework requests also? Or you
haven't got that yet, no.
Anyway, but you feel pretty good rapport with the students.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Probably a few students who are not happy to see a police officer in this school. I suspect there's always
a few that I don't know if they're not happy. They just don't want to engage, and they could basically care less if I was there or not.
Roger, what about yourself at SATEC? Or I guess folks are pretty used to you there. You think you're kind of welcome there by most of the kids, or?
Yeah, for the most part, when I'm out of school, the kids ask, "Where's Officer Roger?"
Is that right?
Why isn't he here? And if they happen to see another officer visiting, they tell him or her they hope it's not somebody's going to be replacing me. So building that rapport, as Paul was saying, is huge. I'm always looking for that kid in the cafeteria. Every kid has to go to the cafeteria during the day at the school. We have over 700 kids at SATEC. So I see every child every day, by being at this.
You literally see every kid in the school.
I'm noticing differences in behaviors. Are they sitting alone, that type of thing, at lunch? Is their body language change and stuff like that? So I'm always, probably 80% of what I do is building relationships. And I think that's what helps prevent a lot of issues from happening. Is if you have good quality relationships with the kids and the families, it's important.
Have you ever come across, and same question for you, Paul, anything in your travels at your schools where you were just really concerned that you thought something was maybe brewing that shouldn't be brewing, and anything really troubling? Of course, BFA's had threats and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just recently, within the last couple of weeks, there, a student that I speak to, most of the time during the day or whatever, always seemed to be a happy-go-lucky person, really outgoing, and I noticed this one day they were just sort of setting off by themselves and really didn't want to talk to anybody. Other students would come over and they'd be like, no, I don't want to talk, whatever. So I, went over, sat down, we had a conversation, and come to find out they were just having problems at home. Nothing to do with school. It was just some stuff going on at home. But we discussed it. I got her down to the guidance counselor, and we got some counseling for them, and they're back to their happy self.
Yeah, Roger, anything at SATEC that especially kind of alarmed you with any of the student conduct or anything?
When I see a change in student conduct, I try to investigate a little bit and see what's causing that, what creates it. At my school, it's probably a little different than Paul's in the sense that I don't so much fear one of the kids doing something. It might be something external, say with the parents. We've had some incidents where parents were getting divorced, and it was pretty contentious. We had restraining orders involved. And when a judge tells, I'll say dad, because most of the time it is the male who's getting the restraining order. You can't pick up your kids anymore. You can't see your kids anymore. That puts us in a pretty tough situation when they come to the schools, either at school events or to attempt to pick up their child. But that's where having an SRO at school has helped the school tremendously. And those are ones that we know about. There's always some that we don't know about. So we stay vigilant to try to learn, not from to pry into somebody's personal business, but just thinking safety and safety of the kids at school.
City school, Chief, is there no SRO at the city school?
No.
That's the choice of the city school, I assume?
Yeah, it is. I would tell you that
everything?
occasionally the two SROs jointly or independent of one another will provide some services down there. But yeah, that's been a choice of the schools. I would like us to have an SRO in every school, including Project SOAR out in the Bay. I think personally, from I go to the Chiefs Conference every year, and I always go to the latest things about active shooter events, because you learn from every one of those things. The reason we don't surround and drown anymore, like they did at Columbine, is because we smartened up. We learned that was a really ineffective way to do that. And the reason we go with run, hide, fight, part of the rationale behind that is, though it creates a chaotic scene for responders, we have to remember what the mission is. And the mission is to save lives, to stop casualties. I have to tell you this funny little story about my granddaughter, who's 6 years old. She doesn't live in this area, but she lives in Chittenden County. She goes to school. And recently they had a conversation about who would help them if they were in trouble. And she drew a picture of this kind of stick guy and painted him blue, and left a spot on the chest, and it said, my grandfather will come get me. And I think about that every day. Every one of us, our grandfathers, fathers, uncles. The most precious thing we guard in our community are our citizens. And our youngest citizens are the most vulnerable. We have to go get them if something goes wrong. So we have a responsibility to prevent it from happening altogether. So I want them in uniform. I want cruisers at the school so that when you pull in there, you see the cruiser. When you walk in the building, you see the officer. And I will tell you that I would stand my officers against any in this country. They're well trained, and they will engage the bad guy. They take it just as personal as I do, and I think all of the officers do. We're not going to let you do that in our community.
Do your cruisers on your regular day at school, your cruisers are right out front, very visible?
Yeah, my first day when I was at SATEC, I drove by the school intentionally, the driveway, and said, where's the most visible spot? And that's where I park. They can see it from the roadway.
Interesting. Chief, let's flip over to street crimes unit. Certainly got a lot of attention earlier this year. Both the St. Albans City and Town came through with some more bucks to bolster the police budget. How do you feel that's been?
Well, I just happened to bring this so that we could talk about it. But I would tell you my only fear is that we've been so successful in the early stages that if we don't continue to maintain the same level of success, people are going to think that they're not doing their job. This is the problem with the average police officer today, is they're saddled with responding to calls in areas that are assigned to them. And in between that, we want them to watch the motor vehicle traffic and make sure they enforce motor vehicle law.
Yeah.
And by the way, this guy's kind of acting suspicious. Keep an eye on him, but don't miss any of your calls. And what we've discovered is that doesn't work very well. In a situation where you have known individuals engaging in criminal conduct, i.e., drug activity or crimes related to illegal drug activity, you really need to have people whose attention is solely focused on going after those individuals. So as you can see, the Street Crimes Unit has made 37 arrests as of this date, 9 females, 28 males. You know, they've conducted many motor vehicle stops, which are high visibility activities. And surveillance, including foot patrol, marked patrol, unmarked patrol. And as you can see, their seizures have been fairly substantial. You know, it's not uncommon now for us to get pounds of cocaine and you know, 80 grams of heroin at a time. And these are not 6 or 8 month long investigations. These are grand slams. They're home runs. It's you see it, you do something about it immediately. And it's a little bit of a change of philosophy. No offense intended. Somebody's got to do the traditional conspiracy cases. But at our level, what you find is person's not going to jail anyway because the jails are full. They're probably going to receive something less than being incarcerated. And you spend a bunch of money and a bunch of time on personnel, paying them to buy drugs from this individual, and you're out the money anyway. So, you know, why do 4, 5, 6 drug buys into somebody and arrest them, and they get arraigned and they get released? So my opinion is, you know, let's get them. Let's just go get them. And I know that I watched the select board meeting in Highgate, and they commented favorably about what we're doing down here. But one of the concerns was, and now select board member Stan Dukas had voiced this concern early on. Is we're going to create displacement. You're going to push them out of the city and town.
Just push them someplace.
But you're going to push them somewhere else. And this is what I would tell you. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And if every one of us did the same thing, we'd push them right out of the state of Vermont. I don't mean to be offensive, but I don't get paid to protect everybody else's community.
The concern is city and town, obviously.
Right. So we believe that, and I would tell you that you'd be tough to find a police officer who didn't agree with this. Oftentimes, bad guys are like squeezing Jell-O in your hand. If they can find an opening to go somewhere else, they will. So, unfortunately, that means we are actively pursuing them and aggressively trying to get them either out of our communities. Sometimes what we're giving them is help. Because all of a sudden, when mom and dad read in the paper that their daughter or their son has a drug problem, they may be naive about it or just don't know. That's when we see the family support start popping up. Suddenly those people show up at court and they say, we're going to get you some help, Johnny, or Sissy, or you know, Melanie, or whatever the person's name is. So I think that, unfortunately, drawing attention to the general public about the crime and the people involved is more positive than negative.
And I certainly give you credit going back to it, especially when like Marty Manahan was mayor. Didn't St. Albans, hopefully not the case now, wasn't St. Albans at the top of the list in Vermont, highest crime per capita in Vermont for a while?
Highest violent crime rate.
Highest violent crime. But
statistically.
I give you folks credit. I mean, I'm sure some communities would have, you know, the last publicity they would want to see getting aired and stuff, but it sounds like you folks, you know, just dealt with that. And I think Senator Leahy came to town, brought a Senate committee and stuff. I mean, I give you folks credit for dealing with the issue out front, and obviously you feel that's the way it should go.
Well, and then thankfully we had the support of the city council and the mayor. But what I would tell you is that this problem is countrywide. It's in every state. It's in every rural, small area. It's everywhere. So anybody trying to deny it is, if they're denying it, they're denying the obvious.
The opioid, again, we could talk for hours about this. The drug treatment center, I don't have the exact name for it. Is it the BART Center on South Main? How do you feel? How do you feel those folks? Are they being of some?
No, I think they're a valuable resource. I
You
think
had people going from this area to like Newport or Burlington without that center being there.
No, I think it's been a great attribute to the area.
Yeah.
I know there was a lot of concern when they first came in that are we going to have problems? I would tell you that we haven't had any significant problems there.
Is that right?
And everybody up here knows somebody who's going there.
Yeah.
And at least they're in treatment.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that we're stuck with is this problem doesn't just go away one morning.
Yeah.
Someone doesn't get up and say, I don't have a headache today, so I'm not going to use drugs.
Yeah.
So any form of treatment that makes them more responsible and less prone to engage in, you know, the big crimes that are committed by people who are addicted are larcenies and thefts because it generates the money they need to buy the materials they're trying to buy. What I would tell you is I spent 5 years on a drug task force in Chittenden County, and I have seen more heroin here in St. Albans than I ever saw on the drug task force,
Really?
and bigger quantities. You know, we're getting
heroin.
pounds.
Is that kind of the drug of choice these days? More
It
than
bounces back and forth right now between heroin and cocaine.
Is that right?
And the cocaine, most of the cocaine's crack cocaine.
Yeah.
You know, but we're getting pounds. We're getting pounds of crack cocaine.
Really.
That was unheard of, even when I was in the drug task force. Pounds was a big case.
Typically coming from places like what? New York City, or is it from out of state or from cities? You know.
There are source communities or cities, locations. I would tell you that you don't have to spend much time thinking about it and taking a look at who we're arresting.
Yeah.
They come out of the greater Boston area, Holyoke, Springfield. Yeah. They come out of New York City. In some cases, they're coming out of Montreal.
Really?
Although we've seen people here now from Philadelphia, Detroit.
Really?
The problem is they can get on the website, on an internet website, and they can see what the arrest rate is and the average punishment.
Really?
You know, and in some cases, the person who comes here, how's the best way to explain it? So years ago, truck drivers would bobtail after they had dropped their load. They'd drop a trailer somewhere and then they would bobtail. And
Sorry, bobtail.
it was just a tractor with no trailer attached to it. And somebody smarter than I in the business world said, this is crazy. You should be held in both directions. You know, so I have to tell you in many ways, some of these source suppliers are thinking the same thing. So they come up here and they bring a load with them, big or small, they bring what is a load for them. And when they get away with it or don't get caught, they go back. And after a while, they figure out that what they should be doing is picking up firearms and guns. So they would bring dope to our city, and they take guns away with them that are stolen in larcenies and burglaries. For a long time, I don't know if you recall, but Massachusetts actually had a billboard up that said, "Thank you, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine." And there was a picture of a firearm.
No, really, I never saw that. Wow.
Yeah. So we're thought of as a source area for firearms because they're so abundantly available here.
Paul, getting back just the drug issue at BFA, you've got the older kids, teenagers. How big an issue? I mean, is it apparent to you that X number of kids probably are using drugs? How apparent is that in your travels there?
I really haven't come across much of it in BFA.
Yeah. So seeing anything actually at the school, almost never. I mean, that doesn't.
As far as the hard stuff, the heroin, the cocaine, stuff like that, nothing. I mean, I'm sure there's some marijuana running around there, but other than that, I haven't seen much of it at all.
Yeah, Roger, and I'd like to think at SATEC, you're not seeing anything, or not, hopefully nothing, but.
No, we're not seeing anything, and we start the drug education early, like 4th, 5th, 6th grade and up.
Yeah.
And that's where we have an opportunity to try to get ahead of this. And I think it's great what the street crimes is doing, because you're taking the drug dealer and you're arresting also the user.
Yeah.
And if you can get the user into treatment and the drug dealer in jail, I think it's a win-win situation. And that looks to be happening. And there's some additional treatment programs that have come up in recent years too. Working Fields is one that I sat down and spoke with. Once someone is successfully into treatment for a little bit, this organization will then try to work very hard at finding them a job and completing that cycle, and hopefully where they don't reoffend and get back into drugs. Yeah. Things like that is what we need as a community. We need to support that. And I think it all starts with the street level police officer making those arrests and, and getting those people where they need to go. That's going to make the greatest impact for our communities.
Paul, when people are just asking you about just police issue, law enforcement issue, drugs, is that kind of the big issue that you're typically asked about, or is there a whole range of things?
When we start talking about that, a lot of the stuff right now that students, staff members, faculty at BFA, when they talk to me a lot about the street crimes unit, because they see that they see the stuff in the newspaper about the arrests that are made, and they'll come up and they'll talk to me about that. And for the most part, everything I'm hearing from everybody is nothing but positive feedback about this unit.
And Chief, we're talking a couple officers. What are we talking for staff? Have we got specific officers assigned to the street crime?
Yeah, we have
unit,
two
or
officers that are already assigned to the street crimes unit, and a third will be after July 1st. So we kind of, when we made the presentation to the town, the select board was quick to pick up on, if it's a major problem, why would we wait to start doing something? And when I said it's about personnel and money, they agreed.
New budget year kicks in July 1st.
Right. So both have agreed and have funded the street crimes unit as of July 1st. And before that, I think they took some money out of reserves and said, we'll pay half. If the city pays half of putting whatever you're going to put together partially until July 1st. Here's another thing that we're doing is knock and talks. So if you talk to community member or police officers, what you'll discover is there are some places everybody knows what's going on there, but you can never seem to get enough information, probable cause, to do something about it. So what I've told my people is, if we have a place like that, I want you to go there in a marked car, in uniform. I want you to knock on the door. There's nothing illegal about telling somebody the truth and saying, I understand you're selling drugs here.
Really?
And I can tell you what the script sounds like back and forth.
Wild reaction.
They go, no. And the officer follows up by saying something like, then do you mind if I come in and have a look around? And they always come back with, can you do that? Don't you need a warrant? And the officer routinely will say, not if you give me permission. And the person will then say, I think I want you to get a warrant then. And the officer will say something like, well, just know that I'm going to be working on trying to get a warrant. There are a couple of things that happen there. All of the people they supply have heard about it by now because of social media. They know the police are there, and they're going to ask them why the police were there, and they're going to say, well, they said we were dealing drugs. And many of those people are never going to go back there again for fear that they're going to get arrested. And traditionally what you see when you do that is the people who are involved suddenly relocate because they're waiting for the police to show up with a warrant.
You've done that a number of times?
Well, I'm not sure how many times we've done it up till now. I can tell you that I've done it in the past as a police officer. When I was a detective in the community I worked for before I came here. And it's highly effective at displacing the people who are engaged in that activity. Because I can give you a great example. Recently we had an individual who was operating on a road in the town just over the line in Swanton, but previously had been on Federal Street in the city. And the guys targeted them because we knew that they were dealing. And before we could move on that location, they set up in another location in Swanton. So we did the raids, and I forget, do you guys remember how much dope we got? Like 2 pounds of crack cocaine?
It was 2 pounds, 2 pounds of crack. There was a significant amount of currency that was taken.
And some of the intelligence that we had heard was they knew they were being watched when they were on Federal Street, so they moved. And they thought if they got out of St. Albans that it would be good, but they only moved short distance out of St. Albans. And then they felt like they were being watched again. So they relocated to Swanton. But anyways, my point is that is demonstrative of the fact that you will push them out of your community if they realize that you're going to do something about it.
And as you said, you're not going to lose sleep about where they're going. You want them out of St. Albans.
I want them out of here. And if every community could do that, and then the state police could do it on a bigger level, we'd drive them right out of the state of Vermont.
And it's important for all law enforcement to share that information, to know who those individuals are.
Yeah.
So don't give them time to set up in another town where hopefully that police agency is working on them as well.
Yeah, Chief, I think I interviewed you, it might have been a couple of years ago, different law enforcement chiefs around here, and the effort was to try to get even better cooperation. How do you feel you're doing? You got state police, sheriff's department, border patrol. I mean, you could probably always do better. Is there pretty good coordination?
Oh, yeah,
As Roger
excellent.
said, I mean, sharing information seems hugely important.
Excellent. So let me just tell you about the incident we had a year ago with the shooting. The drug deal occurs in the park and ride, and it's a ripoff. And there's this pursuit, short motor vehicle pursuit, that ends at the parking lot at the Catholic Church on Lake Street,
Yeah.
and an individual is shot. So 20, I believe the number is, I can go back and check, I sent thank you letters to the agencies that assisted, but the Border Patrol put up the helicopter. 23 Border Patrol agents responded.
2023?
23. We had 16, and I think the Sheriff's Department had 12. And the state police, I don't even know how many officers we got from the state police. And what's good is we share radio frequencies.
And of course, Swanton is where this incident
Ended, yeah. So Swanton was participating too. You know, the bad guys had fled there. But within minutes, all these people roll into action. And it's to the point where even though we do call for assistance, you don't even have to do that. They're listening to their radios, and when they hear that call, they're going. It's the same thing with the school shooting incidents. St. Albans has a 911 call center. So any call like that, we're going to get first. We have pledged to one another, made a mutual aid agreement that we will roll every available troop that we have to that call unless or until we're canceled. And we'll worry about backfilling them afterwards. So in St. Albans, literally, there could be, during a day shift with the SROs on, they'd be locking down their schools, but we'd have detectives, we'd have the street crimes unit, the administrative command people, plus the shift people. There could be 12 people just from the St. Albans Police Department responding to that call. And then we start backfilling the positions in the city. But the Border Patrol has agreed to it, state police, Sheriff's Department, Swanton, and St. Albans. And that pretty much covers all of us.
Interesting.
We had our threat we had at DFA
Recent
after the
threat.
Parkland shooting.
Yeah.
When I made the call to secure the schools and notify dispatch, within, I'm pretty sure it was within 7 minutes, I had 22 officers on scene at BFA.
Wow.
Sheriff's Office, State Police, us.
And that was a bomb. Well, that was a bomb?
It was a threat.
A threat, leave it
It's
at that.
still-
Shooting threat.
yeah, it
A
was
shooting
yeah.
threat.
Yep.
Wow, so pretty impressive response.
Right.
Roger, have you had anything like that at SATEC?
No, fortunately, knock on wood.
good.
And there's some that go around nationally. They're actually sent out on phones and phone numbers and that type of thing electronically. We haven't been hit by any of those. We've been very fortunate.
Chief, any businesses, we're talking about schools here most of the time, any businesses running into around here? Any threats like this? Is it mostly kind of a school issue seemingly?
No, it's not
at
just
all?
the schools. We've had threats at the state office building on Federal Street. We've had threats at Milan. We've had threats at INS.
Around. Yeah.
You know, so we pre-planned for every one of those.
Yeah.
We pre-planned after the Dartmouth incident. We pre-planned for the hospital, how we would respond there.
Yeah.
And that was a real learning experience for all of us. Chris Reinfert, who coordinates on that training and preparation at the hospital, he's a retired Vermont State Trooper. You know, he went down to the debriefing and he brought back things that we'd never considered before. You know, you can't clear an operating room when they're in the middle of an operation. So you have to treat that differently than you would treat a school building, you know? So we really do try to stay up on the latest, greatest, and we try to make sure that we have the right equipment. So we've done a drill at every one of our schools, except for SOAR, I think. And it's a funny thing, SATEC, when we did a drill there, they have a great access control system.
Yeah.
And when they locked down, we had no idea this would happen, but when they locked down, they locked us out. We couldn't get in. So we went out and I went out and bought, they're called military combat Halligan tools. And we have one in the trunk of every cruiser. Recently, I attended some training where the bad guy chained the door and put a padlock to it. When we learned about that, we bought bolt cutters, big bolt cutters, and we put those in the trunk of every car.
Yeah.
There's a soft vest, portable vest, shield that's in the trunk of every one of the cars that can be lashed together. And you can create a wall 5 feet long, I think it is. It's not a preferred way to approach, but if somebody's down, you might be able to get to them and rescue them by using something like that. So we try to think along those lines.
How are you doing for staffing these days? I know for a while, City PD was kind of routinely or sometimes losing officers to better paying departments. I know you kicked up pay. You're doing pretty.
Yeah, I would tell you we're doing fairly well. Until 6 months ago, we had no problem recruiting people. And we haven't lost anybody because of the pay or the benefits. But now all of a sudden, we're down 3.
Really, down 3.
And we have 2 more positions open up July 1st because of the street crimes unit.
Talking about 24 uniformed officers or
26.
26.
So if you look around the state, and I don't want to get into people's numbers, state police have the highest number of vacancies that they're trying to fill, followed by Burlington, Hartford, Colchester, and we're all fishing for the same people.
I mean, it sounds like there are not a ton of people looking to be police officers these days. I mean,
There aren't, and if they come to us because of the legislative unfunded mandates that have been put on us, and the requirements. So somebody comes to us and they've never been in law enforcement before, it will take us 11 months, and we will spend $74,000 on salaries and benefits before they can write one ticket by themselves.
is that right?
So it's in our best interest to try to find people who are already certified.
Here we are. Paul, you've got high school students. Have you got have you run into some of your students you're dealing with who are thinking about maybe having a career in law enforcement, or not too many?
No, actually, we got quite a few at the school. The technical center runs a emergency service program where they, teach fire, EMS, and law enforcement. And there's 3 or 4 of those that are looking at going into law enforcement.
Yeah. Roger, I guess in your case, maybe a little younger, you got a few kids who are, hey, I'd like to be a police officer someday.
Yeah, there are some young ones that are showing an interest in it. And what I do, Richard, at the school is I'll invite, for example, we had a couple that were involved, wanted to be game wardens. So we had a game warden, Dustin Snyder, come in and have lunch with them and talk about what it was. The next year, Dustin had a big case. It was in the County Courier where he solved the case of a deer jacking of 4 deer, and he was on the front page with the deer, and those kids brought that paper in. So we invited Dustin back to talk about his case and how he used math and English to write his reports and whatnot, and how valuable their education was. So it's nice to tie it in with maybe their future aspirations.
Down to about 5 minutes or so. We could be here, I think, probably for hours and stuff, but I guess I should ask you about marijuana legalization. I take a wild guess that none of you 3 is probably real thrilled with that news. But anyway, July 1st, recreational marijuana is legalized in Vermont. Is this just another headache for you, or more than that, or just not good news?
It's a huge headache, and it should be a headache for everybody because very little planning has gone into. For example, how are we going to determine
it's not being regulated
whether you're impaired?
Yeah,
there's no.
That's probably the biggest issue.
Right, and what happens to police officers and firemen and ambulance people? Do you have to write rules and regulations prohibiting them from using it, even though it's legal? And what about the crane operator? I don't want to fly on an airplane where the guy got stoned last night. We all know, we've grown up in a generation, all of us, so that we know what being stoned is. And we all went to school with people who had tremendous potential, who suddenly just got waylaid. So I would tell you that there are many, many concerns. If you have a commercial driver's license, you're subject automatically to a blood test, I think it is, if you're involved in an accident. And that's true with a lot of occupations. So right now we're looking at adopting policies that will prohibit the use of legalized marijuana by any of our employees. How would you feel if the police showed up and the guy kept telling you that Oh, I got so stoned last night. You know, I can't even see straight today.
Yeah, of course, I keep hearing about some companies with seemingly everybody looking for help these days, help wanted signs everywhere. Hearing about some companies who are saying, hey, don't worry, we're not doing drug tests anymore. We're desperate enough for help that don't worry about taking a drug test. But anyway, sounds like, Paul, any thoughts on that? Again, not a good move.
I'll concur with what the chief said. I don't believe it.
Yeah.
It's a good move. Not right now. It was just rushed into.
Yeah. Roger?
You know, Richard, I hear a lot of medical possibilities with it. And I think if they could change from the scheduling of the drug to where they can do research on it, I'd be interested in knowing what that research is. But they really don't have enough research to be able to even say what the medical benefits are.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not in favor of it, hitting the streets, either without some way to measure someone's, impairment.
And the driving while impaired sounds like I hear police talk about that all the time.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. You know, we have to train DREs, which are police officers who are trained in the recognition of behavior and symptoms that are being shown to the police. It's very costly to do that, and it's not guaranteed. You know, some judges are not they don't have as much faith in their ability to do that as others.
Yeah.
So it would be nice if we could have a mouth swab. Problem is, even Colorado will acknowledge that nobody's sure exactly what the measurement is that gets you impaired.
Really? And
But
Colorado's been dealing with this for a while.
But consider this. Probation and parole that makes you do tests so that they can see if you're using drugs every 30 days. And the reason is
Every 30 days.
you have metabolic evidence still in your system for up to 28 days, if you do.
Yeah.
Now, I will concede that nobody's figured out how many days you have the hallucinogenic effects of the marijuana, but let's just presume that it's 3 days. So the average employee, you don't want them using marijuana or being stoned while they're working. So what happens if they get stoned on Friday or Saturday night and they come to work on Monday? And they're involved in a shooting, for example, or a train accident or something else, and the minute they test them, they go, wow, this person was on marijuana. So I don't think we thought it through very well. I just want to say this for everybody's sake. We do not run around looking in people's bedroom windows to try to catch somebody smoking pot.
Yeah.
I have never done that, and we certainly don't do that as a police department, and haven't for at least a dozen years.
Yeah.
I can't speak about before that. Raj, what about you? You were a trooper.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, good. Roger, former VSP.
marijuana's been low on our list for quite some time. We have some other more
I
pressing
suspect
issues.
you got more pressing issues in
that we
general.
devoted a lot of time to and still do. And it's still low on our priority list.
Yeah, Paul, any final thoughts on this issue?
No, everything's been said that needs to be said.
Yeah. Chief, I guess give you the final, again, appreciate the time. We covered a lot of ground. There's tons more ground. Maybe we can get to
Yeah,
more
thank
of it
you very
again.
much for having us. What I would say in conclusion to the marijuana discussion is I think it sends a wrong message to young people. We are combating an epidemic, a drug epidemic in this country. And I think that when we do these sorts of things, we send the wrong message to the young people.
Yeah.
It's not that big a deal. We used to think it was a big deal. Now we don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of money in the state of anti-smoking cigarettes. This is just one more thing that kids start smoking, and it's the wrong
Well,
thing.
this is anecdotally, it seems like I'm seeing more smoking of cigarettes these days, just kind of in my travels around here, but anyway. A lot of issues. Anyway, I guess we'll stop here, but
If I can just
go ahead, jump in.
one quick
Sorry.
thing go back to school safety.
Yeah.
Every time one of these things happen, these shootings happen, everybody starts jumping on a bandwagon. Well, we need gun control. No, we need mental health services. No, we need, people that do this need to go to jail.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one thing we need to do. I think we need to take everything and work on it all together. It's a system. You can't work on one part of the problem and think it's going to go away. We need to bring everything together, work for gun control, bring mental health, bring the justice system in, and make it work.
Sounds like a good way to end it. Thank you very much. Again, St. Albans Police Chief and Fire Chief Gary Taylor, Paul Moritz, the School Resource Officer, SRO at BFA, Roger Langevin, the SRO at the St. Albans Town Educational Center. Thanks for the time. I know you folks are busy and look forward to having you back sometime.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. And thanks to Zach for doing all the hard work for this show. Thank you, Zach. I'm Richard Cowperthwait signing off for now here on Northwest Access TV. See ya.